Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the Iowa caucuses and the U.S. presidential race. Let's get back to our distinguished panel. Let's go to Haroon in Toronto. Haroon, as you pointed out, we listened to some of these candidates. They talk about banning Muslims. They're insulting Mexicans, talking about carpet bombing parts of the Middle East. Talk about new wars and isolationist foreign policy. Should the world be worried by what's happening in the United States right now?
I think so. I mean, you don't have to take one man's opinion for it. All we have to see is what has happened since the 2003 war in Iraq and before that war in Afghanistan, and one can agree to disagree whether the wars were justified or not. What the two wars also proved is extraordinary American incompetence at even winning wars, let alone building nations and so on. You know, we used to say the big bad Saddam Hussein killed 500,000 people. How many Iraqis have died since the 2003 invasion and occupation of the United States? How many civilians have died in Afghanistan? What is the standing of America in the world? Just go and bomb with drones, kill innocent civilians and so on and so forth. This is not a completely one-sided picture, but America's standing in the world stands diminished, and people are reacting, especially in the Republican Party, by saying we should go and throw more bombs and kill more people. I mean, this is astonishing.
Yeah, we're hearing this, you're hearing from the other side, this carpet bombing. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the kind of talk that, again, should alarm the world. You hear on the Republican side, people saying, well, we're not going to let refugees, even children, come into. This is un-American. We've not heard this in a very, very long time.
Joe, you have a radio show with a big following. What are your listeners saying to you? I mean, what are the issues that
the very issues that we're talking about here right now. Mm-hmm. Even though we focus on the African-American audience, but I would even say in Iowa, even though African Americans only make up 3.7% of the population in Iowa, in those caucuses, they may have been, in many of those, the margin of victory. Yes. For one of those candidates, and this is going to be a very interesting situation when Hillary Clinton. Now, I think Bernie Sanders will take New Hampshire because he's neighbors there in Vermont. But let me tell you, when the Clintons get down to Mississippi, South Carolina, man, their accent changes. They're going to pull out all the stops. The John Lewises, the Andy Youngs, the civil rights veterans have already committed themselves to the Clintons or to Hillary Clinton. And on the other side, Donald Trump is going to play to, and this is what my audience has been saying, he's going to play to the good old boys, as we call them. Yeah. He's going to come right back with them and take my country back, and it's going to be take it back from what? An African American who happened to become president of the United States, and they have felt threatened ever since.
Lara, when we listen to Donald Trump, I mean, he makes very inflammatory statements, racist statements. Isn't that a bad thing for America?
Well, sure, it's a bad thing. But I also think that there is somewhat of a, how do I say this, a good side in that when what you really see is the vast majority of Americans don't like this. Mm-hmm. They do not agree with it. So in fact, when you look from a historical standpoint, his overall support is actually very small. I mean, 70% of Americans have an unfavorable view of him. So we are not talking about somebody who is tremendously popular. We are talking about somebody who is speaking to a small group of people for whom he does represent their views. But that is not the majority of Americans. And I do think that when you look across the country and you look at the variety of issues and people, you hear many other voices that come to the fore.
He's a celebrity. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's why a lot of these folks came out to the rallies. I mean, you get to see somebody who was on The Apprentice, who had this reality show. Now you get to see him in person. Oh, and then, like you said, now this dog whistle, now this siren, oh yeah, you know, and when you start, and then when look at who he was endorsed by, David Duke in Louisiana, the former Ku Klux Klan guy, you know, neo-Aryan nation types. And one thing you notice, he never rejected their endorsement. Never. Anybody in their right mind would say, wait a minute, I don't want your endorsement. This is not what America is about. He didn't do it.
He says something inflammatory. Go ahead, Haroon.
Yeah, you know, Joe, I mean, you see, one can concede that election is a bit of theatrics. You cater to the audiences who are electing you in the primaries and so on. You can argue that in the Democratic Party, you campaign from the left, you govern from the center. In the Republican Party, you campaign from the right, come back to the center. All of that is part of democracy, and one accepts that. One even accepts and concedes what Lara is saying. There's a long history in the United States of vitriol and being very partisan and so on. What worries people outside the United States, certainly us in Canada, is that the American public seems to have lost its democratic bearings. What are the principles on which the United States was built? Are those still valid? But you look at the polls and so on, the numbers are very, very worrying. You know, Guantanamo Bay is still open despite the promise of Mr. Barack Obama that he will close it. People being held in detention without charge, being held without a trial. We will go and carpet bomb the people of Iraq and Syria. No mention, no concern about civilians and children being killed, which in fact has been the serious and biggest problem for the United States credibility since 2003 and 2001. So we get more of the same, and this is what is worrying. We don't want Syrian refugees because they're Muslims. They are going to come and kill us. They've lost their confidence. They've lost their confidence in their own democracy, in their own principles. That's the biggest worry here.
Lara?
Yeah, you know, it's actually really fascinating that you bring this up, because the Pew Research did do a fascinating poll where what they found was that at this moment in time, about essentially 2/3 of Americans believe that their side is losing no matter what side they are on. So there is definitely a lack of confidence. And in fact, one of the other things that's true is about 60% of Americans are not confident that they will make a good collective choice. So one of the things that is true, and it's right, we have kind of lost our sense that we know what is best and that we can do this and that our process does work. Now,
right. I mean, there's great economic insecurity. Economies of the world have changed. We understand that. There is cultural insecurity. One understands that. But the extreme forces that are at work in the United States, and these jokers are playing to that sentiment, instead and not showing a single evidence of some intellectual intelligence debate and so on. They're just rabble-rousing even more and fanning fears of terrorism and so on. How many Americans have been killed since that horrible day in September 11, 2001 by terrorism? 45, 46, 50, depending on your count. How many Americans have killed each other by guns? 30,000, 35,000? But nothing, it doesn't bother them, you know, but they are obsessed with 45 killed by terrorism. Of course, we should be worried about terrorism, but they have lost a sense of proportion.
Well, can I also say one other thing quickly? Very quickly. If you also notice what Americans are losing faith in is our media.
Yes.
We haven't talked about that, but the reality is they also are losing faith in the media.
We heard that last night. And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.